Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
I know for me, I had to work on the challenging piece, and so did you. Mm-hmm. We just had to come at it from different angles because mine was more aggressive and yours was more passive.
That's right.
And so once we started to really study the art of radical candor, which is to eliminate conflict as being something negative or bad, then I think we started to realize that, wait a minute, moments of conflict are when we can help people grow personally and professionally the most. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. I hope you've recuperated after our big business trip.
Yes, I'm definitely feeling a lot better. And what's awesome is that I'm recuperating and unpacking from one trip, and I am getting on a plane tomorrow for another one. It's headed to Europe tomorrow.
I know, that's so
fun.
Awesome. Let's toast to that.
Yes.
In case
Cheers.
You're listening, cheers, and you can hear a little something chilling in the background.
That's right.
It may or may not be champagne. Cheers to you. I'll see you there.
It's, I'm going to Paris. We've got to start off with some bubbly.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to having a lot of fun with you while we're in Europe. I'm going to meet you there.
Yes, I can't wait.
We're going to go to Paris for your birthday, your 50th birthday. And that's super fun.
It is.
But you know what isn't fun is what we're going to talk about today. Sometimes.
Well, until you get good at it.
It's conflict, and it's not a fun conversation always, but we're hoping that by the end of this conversation, people feel a little bit lighter around the topic, and that we're able to navigate this together through our conversation. So we do not like conflict, you and I both.
No, I think a lot of people worry about conflict, and as we do, we like to avoid it as a result, and we've certainly mastered that.
Yep. And because of that, conflict shows up in different ways because people handle it differently.
Yep, absolutely.
And just this last weekend, I thought it would be fun if we talked about a little something that involves conflict with you on our trip.
Okay.
Actually, a little birdie told me about this because this happened after I left.
Okay.
So, something about you and a karaoke lady.
Well, here we go again. If you listen to episode 9, where the karaoke theme continues. Yeah, so the birdie told you that I had a conflict with...
A conflict.
A conflict.
Yes. Well, or maybe I construed it as a conflict because I know how this goes.
Yes. Okay, so we will talk about it at length today, but I have dealt with in the past conflict in 2 ways.
Okay.
Very aggressively on the defensive, and the other way is just to completely ignore it altogether. I mean, masterfully. Yep, there is no conflict.
No conflict.
And so I'll give you, our listeners, just in case you're wondering about me and this karaoke hostess, we were in Disney. So Disney, that's where the show was on Disney property, and we were in a hotel, and what was awesome about this place is they had a sushi restaurant, which is among my favorite food.
Yes.
And there was a karaoke stage there, which double bonus. So it was like being at Disneyland for me, but not having to be.
Take a bite of your sashimi and then go sing some Dolly Parton.
Right. So we realized really quick, we were sitting right next to the karaoke stage. And so this setup, what I loved about it, there was 2 microphones. Yay, I love stages with 2 microphones. And each microphone had, again, the theme is safety first, which I get.
Totally respect that.
Totally respect it. Microphones had plexiglass, like there was, imagine a 12 to 18 inch circle around the microphone part of each microphone. Each microphone also had on this little covering. Just imagine a little shower cap. Yeah, a little shower cap, a little elastic shower cap that was on there and then.
As if the microphone has hair.
I promise you there's not a hair on there, because what would happen in between every song, the hostess with the mask on, she would come remove the little shower caps, wipe the thing down, and clean the microphones. And then, I mean, it was detailed. It was, I'm talking a couple minutes between each song. She was very, very specific, and I respect her for her doing her job well. Yes. And I noticed that she had on a mask right when we sat down, and I noticed that other
with
people
all this diligence.
Right. Well, other people in the restaurant did not. Oh. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so then what I noticed very quickly is that you are expected to wear a mask when you were singing.
Well, that's no fun.
No. And I quickly began to take issue with that.
And this is where the conflict begins.
Yeah. So in that moment, there was going to be I knew in my heart of hearts, especially when my friend Hillary and I picked out the song we were going to sing, which was Proud Mary.
Oh, boy.
Which I think, the people who were getting up there and singing Adele, you can sing a slower song potentially with a mask on. And in fact, some of them the mask might have helped. But anyway, I digress.
Yes.
But what I knew in that moment was, okay, I'm not going to be able to keep on a mask.
Not when you're singing Tina Turner.
No, and dancing and do as I do. Grief. So I knew conflict was coming, and I said to myself,
one of those moments.
This is one of those moments. And so I chose to fall back into one of my old habits of dealing with conflict and avoid it altogether. So while I was up on stage, she was behind us working the music. And so I thought she'll never see the fact that as the song begins, I'm taking off the mask and I'm going to make the performance. She won't see it.
Be sneaky.
We'll be fine. It's fine. Just avoid it. Avoid it. You're good. Just don't let her see. Well, next thing I know, she's standing in front of the stage, but I'm up higher.
Yeah.
And she is waving her hands, pointing to her mask, and I'm just looking straight over her head, nailing every word to Proud Mary with my buddy Hillary. And so, yeah, it was. I digressed in that moment to avoid the conflict. With this woman, which I just assumed would lead to an escort out.
Yeah.
And then once I realized she didn't have authority, then
you just kept that mask right off.
It's not one of my stronger suits in that moment, because I will go to great lengths to karaoke. And
I know.
Sometimes the best version of myself doesn't show up. But in that moment, they were right. There was definitely a conflict avoided.
Well, I would have loved to have seen that conflict. Those are the kind of fun conflicts that is kind of uncomfortable in the moment, but then it works out.
It just worked out because everyone in that restaurant truly appreciated that song, and it was energized, and but she was trying to do a job, and I shouldn't have disrespected her. But
I mean, it sounds like she was doing a great job.
She was doing a great job with the hygiene,
right?
But in terms of
caps.
In terms of the party downer, she wouldn't get an A+. Yeah, she was.
Well, hopefully she.
But anyway,
learned her lesson. You can't put a shower cap or a mask on baby. No. You can't put baby in a corner.
Oh God!
And
we digressed.
And hence today, we're going to talk about fear of conflict. And again, this is not something that everybody likes to talk about. Which, thank you for entertaining our whetting our palates with a little fun, because I do think this is a pretty serious conversation, and I know it's something that people dread, right? And so I hope if you're listening to this that you're in good company. We're all in good company together. Conflict is not fun. So Danelle, would you say you're fearful of having conversations where there's conflict? Let's just get vulnerable.
Yes. Okay. God bless. Like, it's, having a conversation where there's conflict is literally, I'm wired to where it's the last thing on my mind of anything that I want to do.
Right.
And I think that people think otherwise about me potentially because they see me in a certain position, or they've seen me navigate, or potentially they've heard, my story, or they've listened to this podcast even. And I will say to this day, if I think about a conversation as a conflict, deep-seated fear sets in. And, fear for me shows up in two ways. And I know that we'll talk about that in a second, but I remain, if I think about a conversation as being including conflict, it remains something that I struggle with.
Right. Can you elaborate a little bit more? I know you said we were going to talk about it, so let's just go there. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about your emotional process in an instance of conflict in the workplace.
Well, I'm an Enneagram 7, and I think that's known by now. And one thing about 7s is that we are not good when we're backed into a corner.
Right.
And so sometimes difficult conversations or conflict, definitely conversations regarding conflict or that include conflict, if I'm caught off guard or if I feel like I'm put in a position, my immediate response is to go defensive and verbally defend myself or defend my position. And that was my first interaction with conflict. And I know Brene and I share, Brene Brown, she talks about it in Atlas of the Heart. So if you've been reading that, in her introduction, she talks a lot about where there were short fuses. And so my earliest memories of dealing with an argument, there was a lot of high volume conversations. And so I brought that into my adult life and certainly into my leadership roles, that my fuse is very short. On the other hand, because I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, I'm a master at denial. And so I'll avoid it. And much like the karaoke hostess in her rules, I was avoiding it. And so I'm kind of an interesting, I've dealt with both the avoidance and the aggression of conflict. And so I think I've had to learn a lot more about dealing with it, because I can go one way or the other, just depends on the circumstance. So I don't think that that's unique solely to an Enneagram 7. I think every Enneagram, I don't know of any Enneagram number that loves conflict except for the 8. And it's not that they like conflict, but they definitely love debate, because that's where their trust is formed.
Right.
And if you've studied the Enneagram at all, it's clear I'm a 7, so I have an 8 wing as well as a 6 wing. But I don't know that anyone, again, I think there probably are some very few people that do like conflict, but in general, I would think that that's not something that people enjoy.
When you think about fear and in a moment of conflict, would you say you're more fearful of yourself or are you fearful of others?
I'm absolutely more fearful of myself.
Okay, that's interesting.
Of what I might say. I will be very, very vulnerable and transparent with the audience. I've had people in my personal life say that I can slice and dice people pretty quick with my verbal words. And, that is not something I'm proud of. And it's something I've had to work on. And I've been very intentional to work on that and to make sure that I keep myself out of those situations. So, yeah, I'm more worried about me always.
Okay. And that is so interesting. And if we're any kind of representation of the population, which this is not a study whatsoever, so please do not misconstrue what I'm about to say. But if we represent 50% of the population is fearful of themselves in conflict, then I am the representative of the other 50%, right, which is I am fearful of what the other person is going to say. So at the onset of any type of conflict or confrontation whatsoever, I make like a possum and just play dead.
Yes.
I basically just go blank, don't know what to do, don't know what to say, don't know how to respond, which my husband will be like, right, because it's different with him. But in most situations, and especially at work, that is something of the past, like you having to work on conflict and managing yourself. I too have had to learn how to manage myself, but to be more responsive.
Right.
Like to have some kind of response that's going to help us get out.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because at your role leading up to your new role as president, but I mean, you've been a leader at this company from the onset. I mean, you spend a lot of time dealing with, again, conflict, and difficult conversations can kind of go hand in hand with this particular episode, but you spend a lot of time in those moments, right?
I do. Yeah. Working with, we at our business, we offer services, but our biggest service is customer service.
Absolutely.
And the only way to deliver healthy customer service is through the people. And so on any given day, I could be having a conversation with someone about a better way to approach a situation or how we might have handled that differently or preparing them for a tough conversation. And so for me, it's absolutely imperative that I know how to navigate a conversation with conflict. And in fact, it's something I hate so much. I've had to learn how to love it.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like I had to turn it on its ear. And it was because you introduced me to a book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott that really put me in the right mindset after reading it to be able to practice this sort of getting over the fear, but then also practicing the art of having a healthy confrontation with someone. So what do you think about Radical Candor? Tell us a little bit more. I know you know it. You've read it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many takeaways from the book. I highly recommend it. It's an incredible read. It is, I think initially it addresses two vital components of leading people. If you're going to use radical candor, there's two things you have to possess. You have to really care for the individual or individuals personally. So caring personally, and then challenging directly versus indirectly. And challenging doesn't necessarily mean aggressively.
Right.
And so I think if you look at those two components of radical candor, we've always cared personally. So that wasn't necessarily something we had to work on. But I know for me, I had to work on the challenging piece. And so did you. We just had to come at it from different angles because mine was more aggressive and yours was more passive.
That's right.
And so once we started to really study the art of radical candor, which is to eliminate conflict as being something negative or bad, then I think we started to realize that, wait a minute, moments of conflict are when we can help people grow personally and professionally the most.
That's right.
So then, again, this doesn't happen overnight, but you can start to almost find yourself and where we are in the journey now, seeking it, which, again, I'll avoid it at any moment. But now that I know that it can help people, you do want to seek it. Like I seek, conflict with you as a co-leader of this organization because I know we're both going to grow and I know that it's coming from a good place. And, if you care about someone, then you're willing to say, in that moment yesterday, here's a better way to show up for the team or whatever, fill in the blank.
Right.
And again, in my personal life, thinking about, raising at one point a teenage daughter who's now become, an incredible young woman. And we still, in those moments, we don't always agree.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a moment where I'm going to tell her something or vice versa. I just told you of an example where she called to give me, she's like, I wanted to tell you how you showed up for me the other day. And it wasn't in the most winning way for me, Mom. And the fact that she could do it, she cared so deeply. And she told me exactly what I did. So challenged directly. She didn't beat around the bush. She told me exactly what I needed to hear. And it was so clear to me. I was like, you're right. I did do that. And now I know. So the next time we have that conversation, and she's like, I know you didn't realize it, but if I didn't tell you, then I was just going to sit on that. And so again, this practice of radical candor has not only shaped all of what we do around here relative to communicating in the, definitely in the sticky moments, but also into our personal lives to help us, show up better in our relationships.
Absolutely. And it's 100% done the same for me. And it's so important for me to keep the peace in any relationship or any conversation or circumstance, quite frankly. If we could have, I remember since I was little, my birthday wish every year was for world peace. Like I'm one of those people. Like I literally am like, world peace. What do you want? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but I think it can happen. I think if people practice these things, I think if people learn how to talk to one another in a conversational, caring, loving, again, with care, like I'm concerned about you and I'm concerned about us. And so let's have this conversation. I think we can actually get better. So once I swallowed this line of thinking, believed it, practiced it, nobody left me. The abandonment comes into conflict.
Sure, absolutely.
Fear of that. No one walked out the door. No one threw me the bird. Nobody yelled back at me.
Lucky for you. I've seen a lot of birds.
So far. so far. Not under radical candor.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
okay.
because you've
good clarification.
The approach is so different, but it really has been a game changer because it's helpful versus scornful. And I think, once and sometimes I'll be in the moment of a conversation, and I'll start to feel that what could be perceived as anger or defense mechanism coming up, and I'll think to myself, now listen, sister, you got to remember to be helpful here, not scornful.
Agree.
So in terms of what Kim offers in the book, what sorts of helpful advice did you take away or that you think would be appropriate for sharing with our leaders?
For me, I think the beauty of radical candor gave me permission to simply frame situations better and like what you just said, in more helpful ways. And because I worry more about what I might say to the other person, it was helpful for me to hear that I can give feedback without being an ass. And I just didn't know. And again, this is not about learning to sugarcoat things.
No.
This is, for me, and most of the work that I had to do was learn to think about what I was going to say before I said it.
Yeah, prepared.
And that allowed me to say, wait a minute, you really want to help this person. You don't want to school or preach, or you care about this person. So you need to directly tell them how, whatever the situation is, how they showed up or what the expectation might be next time if there was a failed expectation. And, a lot of times I could not do that. And so then that's when I would show up. And so in a negative way, and people shut down. They do. They shut down immediately. And I wasn't realizing that. And again, on the 26% approval rating, my lowest rating on all the areas was my communication style. And it literally, this book was one of the ways that I was able to help, progress that part of my self-discovery journey, is just to see it, that it is possible. It's just thinking about it differently.
It is. And one of the things that I want to pay you a compliment to say that.
Well, bring it.
Empathy. Your hair is great. Random aside. But you are one of the more empathetic humans I've ever met.
Okay.
And I've always told you that I do believe that your superpower is empathy.
Okay.
And so it's interesting that you worry about yourself, yet I always, whenever we would prepare for tough conversations with others within our organization or in any business situation, I would say, you'll just do it. Like, you somehow in the moment find that empathetic approach to have someone listen to you. So even if you've got that going on the inside, what we see on the outside is 100% empathetic. And I think that has built over time a lot of trust and a lot of just inviting the conversation. And so now in our culture, we have an very inviting culture of wanting to hear this type of quote unquote feedback, criticism, coaching, call it what you want. But, this may come as a surprise to people who are listening who actually know you, that is something that you have struggled with. I don't think it's going to be any surprise for people that know me.
Yes. So I would say empathy is something that I understand, that I've known, that is something that I can bring to the table in any given situation. But I think what I was using empathy for most of the time was in positive situations. So when things required something that could make someone just pause for a moment, I'm hearing something that's a little bit, it's not ideal.
Right.
Because we're talking about conflict.
We are.
In this instance. So what I learned to do, so for those of you who can understand what I deal with, you're more worried about what you might say, or you've had to deal with more of an aggressive approach to conflict, which is definitely, so let's put the denial one aside for a minute. But if you deal with those things, one of the things that I learned to be helpful for myself was to go ahead and just practice. Just say whatever comes off your mind in the mirror, or maybe to someone that you can really confide in, that they understand that's not what's on your heart, but it's just what's on your tongue.
Right.
And get it out. I do that a lot when I walk. So I'll have some I'll have some doozies of a conversations with myself, which is, probably not something my therapist wants to hear, but definitely, I practice what's the worst thing that you could say to that person in that moment, even that instance. And then I would never, ever want to say that. So I know that sounds like a weird exercise, but for me, it's just been helpful through the years is to give myself the permission to kind of go there for a minute and then realize that is not in my heart, how I feel.
Of course.
It's just in that moment, I'm either, I'm feeling anxious or I'm whatever the circumstances. So, I would say that obviously Radical Candor and a couple of other tools gave us a construct for thinking about it differently. I still have to show up. So you may, and you've been my, I've bounced a lot of those conversations off of you through the years. And so you can see me show up completely opposite, but I always worry that if I don't do that, that I may not show up in the way that I want to and in a healthy way so that we can help that individual or group of individuals come out of there better. And what's going to make them better?
That's right. Yeah. And sometimes that's not always pretty pictures, right? And pretty words. But I'm just wondering, on these walks, when you're having these conversations, are they audible? Because I'm feeling for the gardeners that might be around, or the lady,
my neighbors
with the hats on, and like she's digging a garden, and here comes Nell marching down the street having this fight with herself.
Yeah, or someone that her invisible friend. Yes. No, they hear lots of things. They hear these conversations. They hear literally a lot of loud singing, and I pray on these walks too. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening between me and the Lord in those moments. But yeah, I'm probably not considered to saint in my neighborhood.
She comes. Yeah, it's not you.
Who's she talking to today?
Right. Don't worry, it's not you. It's her having her conversation with, or me. She's talking to me, maybe.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of Radical Candor, in the book, she does talk about a few things to help teams and organizations and leaders sort of get this together so that outcomes become more pronounced. Can you walk us through some of those and what we have to look forward to by just getting comfortable with conflict?
Yeah, and I think, these are the things that I can certainly attest to that worked for us. And I mean, she outlines the benefits of practicing radical candor, and the first one being that with it you can build trusting relationships. And so I think that's at the core of radical, trust, and it's a common theme among our episodes. But this type of communication styles certainly help us build those types of relationships.
Right, and honestly, I think you and I both. This is how we feel about our team right now. Yep. There's trust. We trust one another in terms of information received and information given. So we deeply care for these people, their families, and their lives. Okay, tell us more.
Yeah, I also think that it improves the quality of the guidance you give and receive. So it's two-way. And I believe that when, we're in a situation that can be perceived as conflict, what we know to be true is that people go on guard immediately.
Yes.
So when you start speaking to them in a calm, caring way that is also factual. So lead with care and facts. Suddenly conflict is less of when you lead with vague or subjective type of information, then it leaves a door open for for a response, for defensiveness. And so what you want to do is you want to lead with this care and the facts so that you can have a conversation.
Right.
Factual conversation about what has happened or what needs to happen in this particular case.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict if there's nobody feeling on defense.
Correct.
And so by leading with the facts and leading with care, we take down the guard, the armor, and we lean right into being firm, being fair, and being factual. Right. And so I think this is really good information. What else have you noticed? Or
definitely, I mean, the outcome of getting better at conflict, and in this case, coming from the Radical Candor book, is, we can help lead and guide our teams and our people, and quite frankly, people in our lives, that we can help them grow. And, if we understand their ambitions and where they want to go, we know they want to go from here to here, whether it's with a particular project or in their particular role or their career. It puts us in a position to really be accountable alongside them for helping them get there.
Right.
And, again, I don't see how we can get further along with whatever we're trying to achieve without having, conversations that have an aspect of conflict
right.
to them. And so, I definitely think for me, that's been a difference maker, so that I can frame a conversation where I'm a bit anxious of what I might say in a given instance. I've learned also to take on the thought of what someone might feel, being the empathetic person, that's where the empathy comes in, is I'm worried about how I'm going to make someone feel, because I so relate to feeling so much. So I think just when I'm able to think about it as I'm about to help somebody, I'm making a difference in this moment. And again, sometimes it's not uncomfortable because it's something that I've done before, but then sometimes it is uncomfortable, that depending on the topic. So I would say definitely it helps makes a difference in people's journeys and their lives.
It does. Yeah. And it's almost like if you consider what you just said, if you think about, what if I don't help this person? Where is that? How does that position me as a leader?
What if I don't?
And a human being? And then what are they going to do? They're a representative of my company or my family or my whatever. And so I'm going to send them out in the world like that, so it is rooted in good. It really is. Okay. There's a last one.
Yeah. So I think what it also does is it helps us become more efficient and effective.
Yeah.
Especially around collaboration. Because again, sometimes the conflict is, I think the project should be ran this way, and I think it should be ran this way. And so, or I have an opposing opinion to that. And when you're able to have a discipline of practicing a way to deal with the conflict in a healthy way, you're going to have better collaboration as a result, and that's going to lead to so much more efficiency for your organization versus people running around and avoiding
that's right
a difficult or a potentially different point of view conversation is another way to think about conflict. So I think that's been true for us internally, and certainly true externally. We have plenty of difficult conversations that we have to bring up with our clients or partners that, there's this happening, and it can be a bit uneasy. But when we come at them with, again, care and facts, we can create efficiencies in our relationships, no matter who they're with.
Right.
And again, it's weird to think about efficiencies with relationships, but if you think about it relative to being the best possible version, wanting the best outcome, when you think about it in that lens, it makes total sense.
Right. And I think stating the outcome, the desired outcome at the beginning of the conflict, the beginning of the confrontation where you're going to address the conflict is key. I'm calling this meeting. I'm calling this huddle. I'm wanting to meet with you, husband, partner, child, in order to discuss this. And my intention is that by the end of this, we are going to navigate this very clearly, openly, factually, and we are going to move on. That type of conversation is something that can be put into an organization or put into a culture for the better. That is healthy.
Correct.
And getting there is not easy.
Right.
So if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, well, this sounds blissful, we're not talking about people holding hands and skipping around right at work.
No.
We're talking about adults having conversations where emotions are very much involved and having to get through the absolute normalcy of business where people feel right, people feel wronged, people feel like something could be done better, and I may not agree on the other side, and how to get through that with care, concern, and stated outcomes. It's a ticket. Yeah. If I were to boil it down, I would say without this approach, I would not be sitting in this chair, because I wouldn't be able to have the courage to to trust me, right, to be in this seat. I don't think I would have ever harnessed and gotten my arms around the terrible emotion and fear that I had around conflict in order to progress in my own professional and personal journey. So this has been a huge asset in my life and just an absolute game changer. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. I mean, I really worried about it for the two of us and really all the leaders at our company, but in general, because anybody that's in a leadership position, it's really hard to discuss things that aren't rosy. Right. And so but when we think about it being imminent to someone's personal growth and success, as well as the organization's, then it's worth the practice to learn how to do it in a more effective way. And, that's what we've been able to do here and certainly in our personal lives.
Yeah, it comes from a point of protection.
Yes.
And you are a protector.
Yes.
By nature. I don't know that I'm not a protector, but I'm certainly not, I don't instinctively protect like you do. But in this sense, I've got my arms around how to protect people and our business and myself by doing this, behaving this way. So this book really offers a mindset that is a gift that keeps on giving. And right now, something that's prevalent and going on in the world, we're dealing with conflict around politics. We're dealing with war right now. I mean, we are in situations currently and really over the last at least 2 years, Brene would say since 2016, where people are having harder discussions, harder conversations, more conflicts.
Yes.
She writes in Atlas where she states that people have family members that they haven't spoken to since the 2016 election because of the decision that was made and how the country voted. And so no matter where you sit on that side, I think the point is that we are right smack dab in the middle of social conflict.
Yes.
Where we have to be able to have discussions in a helpful and careful and productive way. And so she talks about in Atlas of the Heart, and I love it. It's actually in the very last chapter. I can't believe it. I mean, she saves the best for last. And it's called Places We Go When We Self-Assess. And what she's talking about is humility.
Yes.
Well, she describes this term intellectual humility. And really, I can see how this emotion is so critical to both succeeding in radical candor and simply just navigating these types of discussions that I'm talking about that we're having to navigate. So there's one thing with work. Work is one situation where you're talking to people about personal and professional growth. Then there's this sort of macroeconomic conversation going on, sociological conversation going on out there about the world and politics. So that's what I'm talking about here. Tell us a little bit more about this intellectual humility.
Yeah, she says in the book that intellectual humility refers specifically to a willingness to consider information that doesn't agree with our current thinking.
That's right.
So if you're in conflict with a person or people in terms of politics, because you mentioned it, right? Is that you believe this and I believe that. And she says that people who demonstrate intellectual humility don't lack confidence or conviction. I think it's important to say that. Like, when you demonstrate intellectual humility, it's not that you lack confidence or conviction. She goes on to say that humility allows us to admit when we are wrong. We realize that getting it right is more important than needing to prove that we are right.
Yeah,
we realize that getting it right is more important than needing to prove that we are right. And this type of thinking is, it can help us manage our fear of conflict. If you think about it, it's like, am I going in this to be right or to get it right? And I think that certainly has added to, certainly helping the two of us, and definitely me with a lot of conversation. Am I trying to be right or get this particular situation right. And again, politics is a big one, but I like to think about it relative to our everyday world.
Yeah.
And I think that, and not that politics doesn't touch our everyday world, but in terms of conversations.
Right.
And, she certainly teased up that big example, but it's the truth. And intellectual humility is something we need a lot more of.
We do.
In the world, certainly in the workplace, and quite frankly, in our homes.
That's right.
And so, I agree with you. I think that was very powerful.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being convicted. And I think on a certain thought or a certain belief or value system, I mean, good. That's good that you're convicted. I think the point is that when you're faced with a moment of conflict, there's usually some kind of belief system or lack of humility that's happening.
Right.
And so it's very important that when we think about going into conversation, so in addition to radical candor with conflict, there's also intellectual humility. Let's state the outcomes. Let's go in this together. Okay. So now for the $1 million question, why the hell are we all so afraid of conflict?
I honestly believe that, it's rooted in perfectionism.
Yeah.
We're taught and raised to please others, to be perfect. And, these are just, it's not sustainable. And, we see it all the time around here, including you and I.
Yeah.
And feeling as though we have to know everything and do everything perfectly when be right. And it's just, it's not the case. And quite frankly, it isn't possible. And, when someone wants to talk to you about, in a particular moment, something that's imperfect, whether that's an action of yours or an outcome that you oversaw, your radar immediately goes up and we get defensive because, we are simply unaware of the weight that we've put on ourselves. And, again, bringing a lot of young people into this organization, they've been told they have to make straight A's.
Yep.
We give everybody blue ribbons. You've got to make a certain score on your SAT. All these things that we've created is what makes you worthy.
Yes.
And so I think when someone comes to tell you that, like in this particular example, that maybe your work could be improved or, it's debilitating to a lot of folks because we want to get everything right all the time.
That's right.
And so I think we literally don't have a society, and most companies don't have a culture where not getting it right is okay.
That's right.
And so but when you don't get it right, or when it just could be better or different, it doesn't necessarily always have to be better, but different. And when you can't accept that helpful information if it's coming into you in a healthy way, which we now know how to practice, it's just sad because we really miss a lot of opportunities. We really do.
We do.
So that's why I think we're scared of it, is because we've been taught to believe that we should always get it exactly right.
That's right. And there's no way.
No way.
I mean, there's no way to do that. You're absolutely right. I think we really owe it to the youth. I mean, you've said it a couple times on different podcast episodes that we've done, but we aren't helping them by not having real conversations with them and practicing this radical candor and this intellectual humility. No, you don't know everything, 12-year-old.
Yes.
No, you don't know everything, 15-year-old. So when they find themselves eventually in the workplace, they're able to handle these sort of situations more at ease than we all do, because I know that fear of conflict is something that everybody worries about.
Absolutely. I agree. In episode 5, we talk about the book Atlas of the Heart, where Brene Brown talks about how emotions play a major role in our lives, yet for some reason we tend to narrow the hundreds of emotions of the human experience down to 3. And that's angry, sad, and happy. And with this limited language, fear of conflict will always be. And managing the approach and managing our emotions is 100% the key to overcoming the fear of conflict, period.
That's it. It is all about managing our emotions. walking in with good intentions,
yes,
we can overcome fear of conflict.
Absolutely.
So this is the kind of stuff that you and I talk about all the time. Like we're talking about it today, but I bet over the last 5 years, I would say fear of conflict and culture. Yes. Those two things have been big primary topics over our last, like I said, 5 years. So this is something that we talk about a lot. I just want to make that very clear.
Yes, it is.
And we're glad to be sharing it with you today.
Yes.
So you're going to Paris tomorrow for a hot minute, like a few weeks.
Yes, going to be there for a while. Very excited. Very excited. It's I've never taken a voyage this long before, so really excited to give it a whirl.
And music will be a part of the journey.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So I'm just curious for our music moment today, what are 3 songs that you'll definitely be listening to, at least when you take off and go into flight tomorrow afternoon, but maybe while you're there too? 3 songs that for sure you'll be listening to.
Yeah, I mean, there's more than that, but so I know you're asking me so that we're not
here all day.
Here all day. I'm turning 50, as everyone knows, and I'm just going to really take time to go over there and really just lean into the fruits of my labor in life. I've been on an incredible journey, and I'm so excited to share it with, family and some friends, and just to really be in a space to where I think about things differently. So I'm sure it comes as a shock to no one. I definitely have playlists that are going for different experiences that I hope to have over there.
Yes.
And so I think 3 of them, and one of the things song that I'm really leaning into right now, I think, and again, I think it's this chapter of my life, is All I Know for Sure by Pink. And when I hear that song, I really love how she's putting it out there. And, I think of my daughter Mackie when I hear that song, and I just think of, honestly, what we're doing here is just sharing with someone else. And so that really motivates me. And so I'm looking forward to learning more about myself and this next chapter while I'm over there. So that song's definitely on the playlist. The song is not new to me, but a friend just shared it the other day, and I hadn't heard it for a while, and it's definitely on my playlist, which is We Don't Know We're Living by Lucy I don't know how you say her last name, but I think it's Silvis. But yeah, that song is incredible. And of course, I also love it because Brandi Carlile sings on the track. So that's probably why it ended up in my Spotify suggestions, but it's an incredible song. And I hope, what it will do for me is to remind me of this precious life that we're in. And so I'm really grateful to my friend who shared that. And then Take Care of You by One Republic. So I absolutely love that song. And I feel very, in this stage of my life, taken care of, and that I'm in a position to take care of so many. And I feel blessed by that. So that song will keep me just in the moment of being present. And again, I think these songs and the playlist that I'm putting together to help me continue to feel grateful, but as someone who can live so far into the future, and we've talked about it before, it's natural to me because I am a 7 on the Enneagram, is to really be present and be in the moment. So that's what these songs represent for me. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to know. Those songs are beautiful, and I can't wait to see what surfaces for you there.
Okay.
Maybe you'll have a little Edith Piaf, maybe a little French music.
Well, I'll be the first to admit I don't know Edith, but I'm going to be on the listen for her, I promise.
I think you'll hear her in Paris.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. I can't wait.
All right. So is there anything we want to remind folks of before we break? Absolutely.
Again, we'll put plenty of what we've shared with you today in the show notes. And again, those continue to be popular, and that's on our website at selfsmarterpodcast.com. So please give that a look again. And if you've missed an episode and you want to know, just look at some of the notes that are in the previous episodes. They'll give you a great idea about what we've talked about. And then again, thanks again for the continued reviews that are coming in. It really, we're going to remain appreciative of that because that's how people are going to continue to find our content. So thank you.
That's right. And with that, we send you into the week and off to Paris with grateful hearts.
All right, everyone, have a great day. Thank you. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.